Today, I want to talk about something that might sound a little unexpected at first, the divine eroticism found in mystical Christianity. At first, you might wonder, what does eroticism have to do with God? Isn't that something reserved for human relationships? Well, in the mystical Christian tradition, the term erotic isn't about anything physical or carnal, it's about the passionate, intimate love that the soul has for God. It's about longing, desire, and an overwhelming hunger for divine union. Now, before we get into it, let me say this. When we talk about divine eroticism, we're not talking about lust or physical desire. We're talking about a spiritual yearning, a deep, profound longing to be united with God. In fact, the way mystics speak about their relationship with God often sounds like the language of lovers. They describe their souls as brides searching for their bridegroom, a love that is spiritual, emotional, and, at its deepest level, transformational. Mystics and the language of divine love. Take, for example, the writings of Saint Teresa of Avila and Saint John of the Cross, two of the most famous Christian mystics. Both of them describe their experiences of God's love in ways that might seem almost erotic to us today. They used words like longing, suffering, and passion, and they weren't talking about a love between two human beings. They were talking about a love so deep, so powerful, that it goes beyond our human experience of love and reaches into something transcendent. Saint John of the Cross, especially, uses vivid imagery to describe this intense relationship. In his famous work, The Dark Night of the Soul, he writes about the soul's journey toward union with God. It's not just about belief, it's about desire, an inner ache that only God can fill. The soul, according to John, is like a lover in search of the beloved, going through periods of intense longing, of separation, only to finally experience the joy and ecstasy of divine union. The beloved, God as the ultimate lover. In mystical Christianity, God is often portrayed as the beloved. This is no accident. Throughout the Bible, we see imagery of God's love for His people in terms of a wedding or a marriage. The most obvious example of this is found in the Song of Songs, an entire book of the Bible that is filled with erotic imagery of a bride and bridegroom. But, here's the twist, for the Christian mystic, this is not just about human love, it's about God's love for the soul. The bride is the soul, and the bridegroom is God Himself. Think about it. The soul is constantly searching for God, just as a lover seeks their beloved. This kind of spiritual love isn't just about admiration or respect, it's about intimate union, about being so close to God that the soul is transformed, made whole. The mystics talk about this relationship in ways that express deep desire, a longing that goes beyond any human experience of love and touches something eternal. The dark night, love and suffering. But there's also something paradoxical here. The mystics tell us that this deep longing for God often involves suffering, the so-called dark night of the soul. The absence of God, the feeling of being separated from Him, creates a kind of spiritual pain. Yet, strangely, this is part of the erotic journey. Just as lovers experience longing when they are apart, the soul's longing for God intensifies in His absence. This suffering is not just an emotion, it's a purification of the soul. It's God's way of drawing us closer, of making us empty enough to be filled with His love. The beauty of it is that even in this separation, the soul feels the desire for God more deeply. This dark night can feel unbearable, but it also cleanses the soul, helping it grow in its love for God, preparing it for eventual union. The union, ecstasy, and transformation. Now, imagine the moment when the soul is finally united with God. It's a mystical union, one that mystics like Saint Teresa of Avila describe in almost ecstatic terms. The soul's love for God is so intense, so consuming, that it is transformed by it. The soul is no longer just longing for God from a distance, it is fully embraced by Him. The imagery here is nothing short of heavenly, and it reflects the kind of erotic union that transcends human understanding. This union is the fulfillment of the soul's deepest desire. And, believe it or not, the mystics tell us that this union with God is the highest form of love. It's a love that transforms the believer, making them more like Christ, and it's the ultimate goal of the spiritual journey. This is the kind of love that changes everything. It reshapes how we see the world, how we love others, and how we understand our very existence. The eroticism of divine love, beyond human understanding. When we talk about divine eroticism, we're not saying that God loves us in a human, physical sense. We're saying that the longing the soul feels for God is like the longing of lovers, intense, consuming, and transformative. It's a spiritual eroticism, where the soul's desire for God becomes a powerful force in its own right. This desire isn't just a fleeting emotion, it's a divine fire, a burning passion that draws us closer to God and changes the very essence of who we are. And here's the thing, this kind of love is life-changing. When we experience this deep connection with God, we aren't the same. We become more loving, more compassionate, more in tune with God's will for our lives. The union with God transforms us, making us more fully human, because when we love God in this profound way, we begin to reflect His love to others in everything we do. In mystical Christianity, divine eroticism isn't about physical passion, it's about a passionate longing for God, a yearning that consumes the soul and leads it to transformation. It's the deepest desire of the heart, the kind of love that changes everything. This love is intimate, transcendent, and ultimately life-giving. So, when we hear the term divine eroticism in this context, let's not be afraid of the word. It's a metaphor, a way to describe the intensity of the soul's longing for God. And when we understand it like this, we can see how it plays a profound role in our spiritual journey, leading us into a deeper, more intimate relationship with the divine. And that, my friends, is the heart of mystical Christianity, a love that is erotic in its desire, but divine in its fulfillment. The deep yearning of the soul. In the mystical Christian tradition, the idea of eroticism goes beyond just a passionate relationship, it's about deep yearning and unfulfilled desire. Mystics talk about the soul as being in a constant state of yearning for God, and this longing is often expressed as a kind of spiritual thirst. This yearning is not merely an emotion that passes with time, but a constant desire for something greater than ourselves. The soul, in its quest for God, is always seeking and always unsatisfied, much like a lover who can never quite reach the fullness of their beloved. This unquenchable thirst is what propels the mystic forward on their spiritual journey. And just like any deep human longing, the absence of the beloved, God, creates an inner restlessness that drives the soul to greater spiritual depths. It's an agonizing, yet beautiful, experience. Mystics don't view this longing as something negative or something to be avoided. Instead, they see it as a gift, because it is through this longing that the soul is purified and drawn closer to God. The erotic language of the heart. The language used by mystics like Saint Teresa of Avila or Mechthild of Magdeburg is laced with erotic imagery, a reflection of their passionate connection with God. But this eroticism is not about sensual pleasure in the earthly sense. Rather, it is a language of the heart that attempts to articulate the unexpressible depth of divine love. One of the most profound ways that mystics express this relationship is by describing their souls as brides who are betrothed to God. This imagery of marriage and union communicates a profound bond between the soul and the divine, a bond that transcends all worldly understanding of human relationships. The soul is described as holy, pure, and yet longing to be united with God in a union that mirrors the unity between husband and wife. This erotic language used by mystics aims to capture a spiritual truth that cannot be fully described through rational means alone. The erotic metaphor allows the mystic to express the depth of their intimacy with God in a way that resonates emotionally and spiritually. It's as if the soul is speaking a secret language, one that reveals the depth of their longing, the intensity of their desire, and the ecstasy of spiritual union. The transformation through divine love. Another important aspect of divine eroticism and mystical Christianity is the transformative nature of love. The intimate connection between the soul and God isn't a static relationship. It's dynamic, life-changing, and purifying. The mystics believe that when the soul is united with God in this deep, passionate love, it is transformed. The union with God, often described as a mystical marriage, is an experience that brings about a radical transformation. In this union, the soul is purified, its imperfections and attachments to the world are cleansed, and it becomes more fully alive in God. It's like a flame being ignited. The fire of divine love burns away the dross of earthly attachments, and the soul is refined and elevated to a higher state of being. The mystical union isn't just about comfort or bliss, though it does bring deep joy. It is also a refining process, a spiritual alchemical transformation where the soul becomes one with God, a process that involves suffering, purification, and longing. But in this suffering, the soul grows closer to its ultimate desire, God's eternal love. And when the union is finally achieved, the soul experiences a profound peace and fulfillment, knowing that it has come home. The sacred union, a reflection of Christ's love. In many ways, the mystical union between the soul and God reflects Christ's love for the church. The bridegroom, Christ, and the bride, the soul or the church, are portrayed as being destined to be united in the eternal act of love. This union, which will be fully realized in heaven, is echoed in the language of the Eucharist and the sacraments, where the soul receives Christ into its very being, just as a bride receives her groom. In this context, the eroticism becomes a symbol of the deepest union of all, that between Christ and the church. The church, as the body of Christ, is called to a relationship of total surrender, just as the bride surrenders herself to the groom in love. It is a union that is united in purpose, fulfilled in love, and eternally bound. This union is not just physical, it is a spiritual communion, a mystery that we can't fully comprehend. But through the mystics' writings and experiences, we catch glimpses of what this love looks like in its highest form. And this love is the model for how Christians are meant to love God, with passion, fervor, and total commitment. The role of desire in spiritual growth. One of the most fascinating aspects of divine eroticism is the idea of spiritual desire itself. Desire in this context isn't seen as negative or sinful, rather, it's an essential part of the soul's growth. The more the soul desires God, the more it is purified and drawn into deeper relationship with the divine. Just as earthly love grows through yearning, spiritual desire nurtures the soul's connection with God. In fact, the mystics often argue that desire for God is the very thing that makes us human in the truest sense. The more we desire God, the more we are transformed to reflect His nature. In this way, desire is not just a form of longing, it is a form of becoming. The soul, by longing for God, is becoming like God, its desires being shaped and purified into a deeper, more profound love. The erotic as a sacred pathway. Finally, it's important to remember that divine eroticism, as understood in mystical Christianity, is not about surrendering to earthly passions or seeking worldly pleasures. It's about surrendering to divine love, a love that transforms and elevates the soul. The erotic language used by mystics is a spiritual pathway, a metaphor that allows the believer to explore the intimacy of their relationship with God. This divine eroticism is a way of expressing the deepest mysteries of the Christian faith, that God loves us, desires us, and calls us into an intimate relationship with Him. It invites the believer into a sacred love affair, one that transcends the human understanding of love and points toward an eternal, unbreakable union with the divine. In conclusion, the divine eroticism of mystical Christianity offers us a unique and profound way to understand our relationship with God. It's about more than just belief, it's about passion, longing, and intimate union. It invites us to see God not just as a distant creator but as a lover, longing for us to draw near, to be consumed by His love, and to be forever transformed by it. And in this love, we find our truest selves, our deepest desires, our highest purpose, and our ultimate fulfillment. This erotic longing isn't about earthly desire, it's about a divine pursuit that leads us into a love that knows no end. It's a call to live with the intensity of divine love, to seek God with all of our hearts, and to enter into the mystical union that will one day bring us eternal joy. Divine eroticism as a path to transcendence. One of the most profound aspects of divine eroticism in mystical Christianity is how it serves as a pathway to transcendence. The concept of eros, often linked to human passion and desire, takes on a completely new and elevated form in the mystical tradition. It's not merely about earthly attachment or the physical realm, it becomes a spiritual transcendence, guiding the soul toward its ultimate purpose, union with God. In this sense, the erotic longing is not something that keeps the soul trapped in worldly desires, but something that frees the soul from the limitations of the physical world. The soul, through its desire for God, ascends beyond its earthly desires and reaches for something eternal. It is as if the passion the mystic feels for God pulls them up from the mundane, elevating them to higher planes of spiritual awareness. This eroticism is therefore a spiritual catalyst, one that transforms the human soul and leads it beyond the confines of its earthly experience. Desire is a bridge between the material and the divine. This spiritual desire is described as a bridge between the material and the divine. As humans, we experience the physical world, but mystics speak of a longing that reaches beyond the tangible. The soul's desire for God is like a bridge that spans the chasm between the visible, material world and the invisible, divine reality. It is through this longing that the soul is drawn upward toward its Creator, seeking the union that has been destined for it. This longing, then, becomes a kind of spiritual gravity, a force that pulls the soul closer to its divine origin, just as lovers are irresistibly drawn toward one another. The mystics see this yearning as something that transcends the flesh, as it carries the soul into realms of pure spiritual desire, where it can be embraced by the divine presence. In this context, desire is not a mere earthly sensation, but a heavenly pull toward the divine, a cosmic force that shapes the very path of the mystic's spiritual journey. The intimacy of divine eroticism, beyond words. One of the key features of mystical Christianity is that the relationship with God is described in terms of intimacy, an intimacy that goes beyond what words can fully describe. In fact, many mystics will say that their experience of God's love is so profound that it is beyond language, beyond anything they can articulate. The very act of loving God is an experience that goes beyond human understanding, and it's often expressed in terms of ecstasy or rapture. This divine eroticism is thus seen as an experience that overflows the boundaries of language. The mystics speak of this silent union, where the soul is no longer merely communicating with God through words, but is consumed by His presence. In this space, the soul's desire and the beloved's response are no longer articulated in language, but are felt, lived, and experienced in a way that defies human comprehension. This goes hand in hand with the mystery of God's love. For mystics like St. John of the Cross, this love is unfathomable, a divine mystery that cannot be grasped by the intellect but must be experienced through the heart. The mystic's love for God becomes an experience of total surrender, the yielding of the will and the ego to the divine presence. It's an intimate union where the soul is so immersed in the divine love that it no longer feels any separation from God. This mystical union is often described as an ecstatic state, a kind of spiritual union beyond time where the soul becomes one with God in a way that cannot be described with words. Erotic love, a reflection of God's own desire. At the heart of divine eroticism and mystical Christianity is the realization that God Himself is a lover. The mystical relationship between the soul and God is often framed as an exchange of love, but this exchange is not one-sided. In fact, it is through God's desire for the soul that the soul learns to desire Him in return. The mystics speak of God's active pursuit of the soul, calling the soul to Himself through divine love. This divine love is not passive, it is dynamic, intense, and deeply intimate. God's love is so powerful that it awakens the soul to its deepest longing. It's not that the soul creates this desire on its own, but that it is drawn into a love that it cannot escape. The divine eroticism described by the mystics reveals that God's love is a searching love, one that actively seeks the soul out, calling it to an intimate relationship. The soul's desire for God is not just a reaction to its own inner longing, but also a response to God's active desire for the soul. This mutual love and yearning form a sacred dance, where the soul and God are drawn toward one another, not in a static way, but in an ongoing and ever-deepening relationship. The transforming power of sacred desire. The final element of divine eroticism is its transforming power. The mystics describe their encounters with God's love in terms of personal transformation. Love, as it is experienced mystically, is not merely an emotional feeling, but a force that transforms the soul. When the soul truly experiences God's love in this passionate and intimate way, it is changed forever. In fact, this transformation is often described as the soul becoming one with God, in a way that makes it more fully human, more authentically itself. This process of spiritual transformation is the goal of the erotic journey, to become whole, to be fully united with God in a love that heals, purifies, and elevates the soul to its highest potential. The union with God transforms the soul in such a way that it no longer sees itself as separate from God, but as a part of His divine essence. In this way, the erotic longing for God is not just a means of personal fulfillment, it is a transformative act that ultimately reflects God's own love for humanity. Conclusion: a sacred mystery beyond words. Divine eroticism in mystical Christianity invites us into a sacred mystery, a profound union with God that is both deeply intimate and spiritually transforming. It is a love that transcends human understanding, a passionate yearning for union with the divine, and a force that purifies and elevates the soul. Through this mystical love, the soul is transformed, becoming more fully united with God and more fully alive. This is not a love that can be easily understood or described with words. It is a divine mystery that can only be experienced, an experience that is both intimate and transcendent, drawing the soul closer to its Creator and, in the process, leading it toward its true purpose. And so, the divine eroticism of mystical Christianity shows us that love, in its deepest form, is not just a human experience. It is the ultimate truth of the divine relationship between God and the soul, a relationship that, when fully embraced, leads to profound transformation and eternal union with the divine. The role of silence and contemplation in divine eroticism. In mystical Christianity, the experience of divine eroticism is not only about desire and passion, but is also profoundly connected to silence and contemplation. While earthly eroticism often involves words, gestures, and actions, the mystical union with God is deeply rooted in silence, a space where the soul can listen and receive the divine presence. The mystics often describe their encounters with God not in terms of vocal expressions, but in wordless, intimate communion. This silence is a form of spiritual listening, where the soul ceases to act and instead surrenders itself to God's presence. It is in this stillness that the soul experiences the fullest embrace of God's love. The act of listening in silence allows the soul to be filled with divine whispers, to hear God's voice in the deepest recesses of the heart. This is a mystical listening, where the soul becomes attuned to the subtle movements of divine love. The silence becomes a sacred space where the soul is nourished, and its deepest desires for union with God are expressed not through words but through presence and surrender. In this sacred silence, the soul finds that its yearning is both satisfied and deepened. It is a space where God's love is received in its purest, most transformative form. This contemplation and silence help the mystic enter into the heart of God, where the passion of divine eroticism transcends human language and becomes a state of pure, unified bliss. Mystical love as a reflection of divine compassion. Another important facet of divine eroticism and mystical Christianity is its deep connection to divine compassion. God's love is not simply a force of attraction, but also one of deep compassion and mercy. The mystics often describe God's love as pursuing the soul, not in a way that is overbearing, but with a tenderness and care that reflects God's great mercy. This divine compassion is a healing love, one that reaches into the deepest wounds of the soul and restores it to wholeness. For mystics, the experience of divine eroticism is not only one of union and rapture but of healing and restoration. The soul, in its longing for God, often carries the wounds of sin, suffering, and separation from the divine. God's love is a compassionate love that comes to meet the soul where it is, and in that union, the soul is healed. This compassionate aspect of divine eroticism shows that God's desire for the soul is not simply about satisfaction or fulfillment, but about restoration, healing the broken parts of the soul that yearn for divine presence. In this sense, divine eroticism is deeply intertwined with divine mercy. It's not a mere longing for a distant lover, but a passionate pursuit of the soul's wholeness. The mystic's encounter with God, therefore, is not simply about ecstasy or bliss, but about wholeness and healing, a love that makes the soul whole again, restoring it to its original, perfect state in God's image. The desire for divine union as a cosmic calling. In mystical Christianity, the desire for divine union is not seen as a personal whim or individual desire, but as a cosmic calling that extends to all of creation. This calling to union with God is not confined to any one soul or any one individual experience. It is an invitation to the entire cosmos, to all of creation, to enter into a divine marriage. Just as the mystic experiences a deep desire to unite with God, so too does the entire universe yearn for this ultimate communion. The desire for union is not confined to human beings alone, but is embedded in the very fabric of creation. Every living being, every atom, every element of the universe is moving toward this great union with the divine. The mystics often speak of creation itself as a wedding feast, where all of nature is invited to partake in the great celebration of divine union. This cosmic desire for union with God reflects the all-encompassing love that God has for all of creation. This universal longing for divine union is not a separate or isolated experience, but a shared, collective journey. In the context of divine eroticism, this desire to unite with God is part of the grand cosmic narrative, the story of creation returning to its creator, of the soul and the universe being reconciled to God through the sacred act of love. The mystic, in their union with God, becomes a microcosm of this greater cosmic desire, reflecting the love and yearning of the entire created order. Divine eroticism and the power of surrender. One of the most challenging yet transformative aspects of divine eroticism is the power of surrender. In earthly eroticism, intimacy often involves a give and take, a mutual exchange of affection and desire. But in the mystical experience of divine love, the soul is called to surrender itself completely, to give itself up in total abandonment to God. The soul's desire for God is met with God's desire for the soul, and in that meeting, the soul is invited to let go of all control. This surrender is not about losing oneself or identity, but about allowing the soul to be redefined and transformed by divine love. The mystics speak of the soul becoming like a vessel, completely emptied of its own desires, so that it may be filled with the presence and love of God. This radical surrender allows the soul to experience God's love in its fullest form, a love that is both intimate and awe-inspiring, both gentle and overwhelming. Through surrender, the soul enters into a state of perfect freedom, freedom from the self, freedom from earthly attachments, and freedom to experience the pure love of God. This freedom comes not from escaping from the world, but from entering into a deeper, more profound relationship with the divine, where the soul is free to receive and be transformed by God's love. In this state of surrender, the mystic experiences what can only be described as spiritual ecstasy, a divine rapture that consumes the soul and leads it into a deeper union with God. The eternal nature of divine eroticism. Finally, one of the most beautiful and profound aspects of divine eroticism and mystical Christianity is its eternal nature. While earthly love may be fleeting, the love between the soul and God is timeless. It stretches beyond the limits of time and space. The union with God that the mystic experiences is not a temporary or passing affair, but a relationship that will last forever. The mystics often describe their union with God as a foretaste of heaven, a glimpse of the eternal union that will one day be fully realized in the afterlife. The erotic longing that the soul feels for God is an eternal yearning, a cosmic call that will never be extinguished, even after death. In heaven, the mystic believes that this union will be fully consummated, and the soul will experience the eternal embrace of God's love in its perfect form. In this eternal context, divine eroticism is seen as not bound by time, but as a constant force that propels the soul toward its ultimate destination, eternal union with God. It is a love that never ends, and its pursuit is a journey that transcends life and death. This eternal love calls the soul to something far greater than earthly existence. It is an invitation into an eternal rapture, an endless dance of love between the Creator and the created, where the soul is forever held in the embrace of God's divine love. In sum, divine eroticism and mystical Christianity reveals a love that transcends human experience, yet calls deeply to the human heart. It is a love that purifies, restores, transforms, and elevates the soul into union with God. This passionate desire is not simply an earthly longing, but a cosmic force that draws the soul closer to its Creator, inviting it into a relationship of perfect surrender, transformation, and union. The path of divine eroticism is one of great mystery, and those who walk it are drawn into a deeper, more intimate relationship with the divine. It is a love that heals, restores, and brings the soul into an eternal embrace, a journey that is at once personal, cosmic, and transformative, leading to an eternal union with God in heaven. I haven't published a blog post in several months, because all of my writing has been devoted to my latest manuscript. I'm super excited about the prospect of publishing it because it covers how important love and suffering are to our personal growth and spiritual transformation. The book covers many aspects of both science and spirituality, and includes teachings from the Buddha, Patanjali, Jesus, Lao Tzu, and so many more great teachers throughout time. There's an entire chapter on the love and suffering associated with mystical traditions like Sufism and the Kabbalah. Ever since my graduate training at CIIS, I have had a passion for Western mystical traditions. While most often ignored and suppressed by institutionalized religion, these traditions offer a rich experiential approach to monotheistic belief. While it's hard to find organizations that present mystical teachings, one huge inspiration has been Richard Rohr's Center for Action and Contemplation, which has been putting out an excellent series of podcasts called Turning to the Mystics. I'm also a big fan of the Let's Talk Religion YouTube channel, which puts out incredible content. They have some great videos on Christian mysticism, Jewish mysticism, and Meister Eckhart. And if you're wondering what Christian mysticism is all about, we can look at Bernard McGinn's description. The mystical element in Christianity is that part of its belief and practices that concerns the preparation for, the consciousness of, and the reaction to what can be described as the immediate or direct presence of God. The keywords here are the immediate or direct presence of the divine. Mysticism, then, is often described as experiential knowledge. Rather than sitting around and talking about the divine, one communes with it. There have been numerous mystics throughout time, many of which you might have heard of, like Rumi, Hafez, or Saint John of the Cross. But it's through the content of CAC in Let's Talk Religion that I first found out about Mechthild of Magdeburg, a female Christian mystic born in 1207. I found her writings incredibly intriguing, and so vastly different than other mystical writings throughout time. The most intriguing thing about it was how, well, sexy it all is. Unlike most Abrahamic religions which sun the desires of the flesh, the writings of Mechthild are permeated with it. They absolutely ooze with erotic desire for the divine. If you thought Hafez was spicy, Mechthild of Magdeburg makes even modern erotic fiction look tame. The Let's Talk Religion episode introduced this quote from Mechthild. Then the bride of all delights goes to the fairest of lovers in the secret chamber of the invisible Godhead. There she finds the bed and the abode of love prepared by God in a manner beyond what is human. And I knew I had to find the rest of the text. It wasn't easy, but I finally found the whole poem in God, Desire, and a Theology of Human Sexuality by David H. Jensen. I wanted to put it here so it would be easier for anyone to find, and be inspired by such a decadent and erotic relationship with God. So, here goes. Then the bride of all delights goes to the fairest of lovers in the secret chamber of the invisible Godhead. There she finds the bed and the abode of love prepared by God in a manner beyond what is human. Stay, lady soul. What do you bid me, Lord? Take off your clothes. Lord, what will happen to me then? Lady soul, you are so utterly formed to my nature, that not the slightest thing can be between you and me. Never was an angel so glorious, that to him was granted for 1 hour. What is given to you for eternity? And so you must cast off from you both fear and shame and all external virtues. Rather, those alone that you carry within yourself shall you foster forever. These are your noble longing and your boundless desire. These I shall fulfill forever with my limitless lavishness. Wow! First off, the writing is pure poetry. I love the combination of words like noble longing, boundless desire, and limitless lavishness. These words seem particularly prescient to share because there is a debate in the mystical world on how to treat the writings of the mystics. There are several memes going around expressing how people misunderstand Rumi's divine poetry as relating to one's intimate partnership. This makes us wonder, are mystical poems using romance as a metaphor for God, or God as a metaphor for romance? And I would say, both. The essence of mystical awakening is that of non-separation, including that there is no separation between the human and spiritual, the soul and divine. So our personal love for our partners is divine love. Divine love is expressed in the love we demonstrate to each other. And that divine love can be intimate, close, orgasmic, and ecstatic too. This is the lesson of Mechthild and so many others. Thank you so much for watching and taking the time to dive into this profound journey with me today. Your presence here is truly appreciated, and I hope this exploration of divine eroticism and mystical Christianity has touched your heart and opened up new dimensions of spiritual understanding. If you found value in this content, please consider liking, sharing, and subscribing to the channel for more deep dives into the mysteries of faith, spirituality, and divine love. I'd love to hear your thoughts, questions, and reflections in the comments below. Let's keep the conversation going. Remember, the pursuit of God's love is a journey, and every step you take brings you closer to the divine embrace. Stay blessed, and I look forward to connecting with you again in the next video.